Here's how you can compose melodies like a Weeknd track. I'm aiming to give you some chord progression ideas and synth hook ideas you can take to use when producing music in any DAW. So I'm using Logic, but this applies to any workstation. This is the first video like this that I'm making, so we'll see how this goes, and please give me feedback on if you want to see more in terms of audio production. I know this is mainly a piano channel, but we're gonna mix in piano with audio production on this one. So for this tutorial, I have my keyboard as a synth just hooked up to the DAW, and you can make any keyboard that you own a synth just by this MIDI cable. It should have a MIDI out like most keyboards do, even very basic ones, so you can hook that up pretty easily. So I'm gonna kind of go through what the Weeknd instrumentals sound like in terms of their chords and synth hooks. I'm specifically using Blinded Lights for this tutorial, but I mean, looking into just his top hits, he doesn't do anything too complex. That's why I've chosen the Weeknd for the first one of these kind of videos, because he's a lot simpler than the likes of like Aphex Twin and Kaytranada even. So I have a drum loop here. I have just two pads panned right and left using 80 Starlight. So I actually used this video to quickly get the sounds of Blinded Lights. Joe Guthrie, I think his name is, so I'll link that down below. It's a good video to check out. Using a 70s classic synth bass and then an agile synth bass paired with that to get the kind of sound of Blinded Lights as a bass. And then the main synth hook is using massive saws. Just with those 5 layers, I have a drum loop as well. It already sounds very full and pretty similar to the actual tune. What would help you immensely as I'm explaining these chords is the free chord Bible. So if you can just download that below, and it will tell you all of the numbers of chords for each key. So you can just flick through that as I'm talking through this tutorial, because I'm referring to chords as numbers here and it could get confusing. The track is in the key of E flat, and the chords for the whole track are F minor, C minor, E flat and B flat. So that's the first thing to note about this song. One, the chords are pretty simple, but they're not the standard 4-chord kind of progression that a lot of pop songs use. He's also using 2 minors at the start and then going into 2 majors as a sequence. So he uses F minor to start with the first chord, and the riff of the synth hook is based around the note F, and it basically just dances around that note. If there was one thing to take from this tutorial, it would be to just completely simplify the chords, and if you're coming up with a synth hook, and don't overcomplicate it, because that seems to be all of his hits. Well, I looked into Starboy and Save Your Tears as well, and they're kind of similar to this. So the chords he is using are F minor, C minor, then it goes to E flat, which is the tonic, so it's in the key of E flat, this song, and then B flat. So F minor, as he's playing F minor, the synth hook dances around the F note. So I suppose that's a trick that you can do if you're using a chord in the left hand. Say it's a minor, so this is the second chord of the key of E flat, which means every second chord is a minor. So it shouldn't sound necessarily strong, but in this song it does. And I think it's because that very strong synth hook uses the note F, which coincides with the F minor chord, and it just stays there. So that's some kind of thing that you can keep in mind when coming up with melodies yourself. So F minor, C, and then the third chord of the sequence is the tonic, so E flat. And by the time that chord lands, the synth riff is basically doing the notes of that chord, including F again. and then finishing on B flat, and again F, as F is in the chord of B flat. This is the riff with the right hand. So that's what I mean about it just dances around F. Don't overcomplicate it. And then whenever the chord E flat comes in, it goes, which is basically the chord of E flat, just including the F again. So like this riff, it's a great little synth riff as well, but it seems to use that as a bass to just stick out and get in people's heads, just the F note there. And then it lands on F again as you play the B flat chord. And that is something to keep in mind. Like, he chooses the second chord of the key, which is F minor, to start with. And it kind of makes that F note pretty strong because it's the first chord in each sequence. And then he goes to another minor, C. And he's basically playing a C minor in this first section of the riff, using the same notes. He's just including F as well. And then, yeah, as I said, he plays B flat and then it goes to basically the B flat chord. So to summarize with these synth riffs, come up with the chord progression first, keep the synth hooks simple, and don't go too far off the chord progression that you came up with in terms of the notes you use for each synth hook. This is strictly for Weeknd songs. This isn't a general rule, but the way the Weeknd produces is like this. And I suppose that does create really catchy hooks. It's a pretty safe way of composing, I'd say. That's the main synth hook. There's an arpeggiator that comes in later. And for the bass, it only is using the root notes of each chord. So that's something very simple that you can just apply to any song. This is the melody for Blinding Lights, but Starboy is, the chords are E minor, D, C, D, jumps to B minor 7, and then it repeats the whole way through. Save Your Tears, the chords are C, A minor, E minor, G, and then repeats. So he seems to do a fair bit of joining minor chords together. So Save Your Tears is another example. It goes C major, save your tears for another day, save your tears for another day. Yeah, in the middle, those two chords were both minors. And also, he uses the third chord, which is E minor, whereas a lot of pop songs wouldn't do that. The standard ones are the first, fourth, fifth, and sixth. But yeah, so for your Save Your Tears, he uses E minor, which is the third chord of C major. And that is fairly irregular in terms of standard pop songs, as they usually rely on the first, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So if you can practice dipping out of those four chords and using a second or a third to replace one of the standard four, between Save Your Tears and Blinding Lights, he has effectively just used the four chord trick, but he's swapped out one of the chords with like a second, or he swapped out one of the chords with a third. So that's something simple you can do and play around with it. But again, to summarize, simplicity is the key when it comes to composing songs like The Weeknd. Production is another thing. It's not easy to reproduce these songs, but to compose them and play them on the piano, it is easy. And then to use these kind of composition tactics that he uses is easy to apply to your own audio production. That's mainly what I want to do the tutorial on. It seemed like a short one, but just let me know how that was, and if you'd like to see more of this kind of format. I will, I think, more stick to piano tutorials, but I hope this helped a few of you who are into audio production and use like Logic or Ableton to produce music and stuff. I'm offering one-on-one classes as well, so we can talk through audio production on those as well, or just simple cut off there. But I was going to say, if you want to book in one-on-one tuition classes, you could do that now. If you want some help with your piano playing or audio production, you can book that in now below. The link is down there to my calendar. And yeah, thanks for watching this video. Give me some feedback on it. Let me know what I missed. And if you want to see kind of more of this kind of stuff, just put them down in the comments for me.